Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Wednesday, February 10th. Uh, all kinds of stuff is going wrong here, so I'm not sure if we're going to have a good stream. I've been complaining certainly a lot about uh, my Wi-Fi router and it dropping connections and just having trouble in the process of trying to specifically deal with that. It has finally just given up the ghost and completely broken. And so in part of the process of trying to deal with that, decided to just take the DDWRT software and completely remove it and flash it back to the default software, and at that point the 2 gigahertz Wi-Fi network just stopped working altogether. It's just like totally not there, won't come up, won't reset on the reboot. But yeah, that was the idea, was just to erase everything, set it back to default, flash the default firmware. If this literally was a settings thing, then that should have fixed it, or should have, as being the subjective term there. There is also, but there's also a possibility that I just set some setting that actually burn out the hardware, or I just frankly use the hardware. There's definitely cases where like you could break something with beta software that is affecting the low level values of things. But yeah, that's just kind of like not gonna yeah, so sorry. I'm also, because of that, I don't have like any quality of service established, and any of the settings I would like to have setting. So who knows how this networking will work. This will be a good experiment just to see, has my quality of service settings really even affected much, or were they just me tinkering with things that didn't really even need to tinker with. I've ordered a new router, which paid a ridiculous amount of money for it, $250 for a router that came out in 2016. But I guess I might as well stay a generation behind for another generation, that because it seems like all the new routers, the Wi-Fi 6 routers, probably wouldn't run that well anyways. They don't seem to move very well, and there's a chip shortage going on right now. So the idea that somebody's going to design and come out with a brand new router better than what I have, that's open up WRT, is not amazingly high. So hopefully that will arrive today, and I can spend the rest of today working on it, getting it working in some way. The one thing I will say is that while the 2 gigahertz Wi-Fi network failed miserably, the 5 gigahertz network with the default firmware is working perfectly. I've had absolutely no drop off whatsoever. So there was obviously an integration problem between the chipsets using the 2 gigahertz frequency and the 5 gigahertz frequency, and so something on the chip level or on the circuit board level clearly was going wrong, and that's why it was dropping out signal every now and then. Maybe that's because of my settings, maybe it's not. And when I do eventually install DDWRT on the new router, I'm going to try to be as minimal as possible. There's a rule I was trying to implement. One of the rules of security is no default settings, effectively. Don't have the default login be admin. If the default login is admin, don't keep that login. Get rid of that login. In Linux, the default login is root. Don't enable the root login, or don't, at the very least, don't have that password be the default password. Well, on routers, you are given the machine addresses, MAC addresses, for multiple ports there. You would, and internally on the network, it's not so much a big deal, but even there, you might want to change the port numbers, change the MAC addresses to something different, to a randomized MAC, and that's where, particularly, iPhone and Android phones have started doing that, is that they will give randomized MAC addresses, I know at least iPhones will, to Wi-Fi routers, because they don't want any bit of information leaked out. And you can figure out who manufactured your device by a MAC address if you use the default MAC address, which could then leave you to figuring out what kind of device it is, or what kind of security holes it is. So I had all the machine addressable code, or MAC address, whatever. I don't even know what MAC actually stands for these days. It's such a low level thing, remembering it is kind of pointless. I had all those changed. I think I'll leave those, at least temporarily, at their default. It's just not, like, I really want to go limited and focus more on the things that I do consider more important, which are just getting ad blocking back to work. Right now I have no ad blocking enabled on the Wi-Fi routers. I still have the plugins installed on my Chrome browser, so that'll cover most ads. But getting that to work in general is very important, and dynamic DNS is important for me trying to have a server that actually works at some point. And quality of service is more than likely important. And port forwarding is important. And I will say that the default software is totally inadequate. Like, it kind of has all of that at a small level, but it's missing every little extra thing. It's defaulting a lot of things. It's just, it's not designed for somebody who wants to actually tinker with settings. It's designed for people to just install a router, get up and go. What were the missions today? Let's double check that. So yeah, that's what I've been, Runecraft or Bloodcraft. Alright, well, let's try Bloodcraft. I keep trying Bloodcraft and I keep losing, so, but whatever. That losing is the consistent thing regardless of who I try. So yeah, that's what I've been mostly dealing with. I did manage to get a couple more episodes, 2-hour episodes of Danganronpa. Even though I had watched Game Grumps play the game, I still don't know who committed the murder in Chapter 2. And so I know who was going to get murdered, and then I hung out with that person as much as possible to see if I could get their relationship meter all the way up to 2 stars, and I still couldn't do it. So it does imply to me that either you have to pick somebody and hang out with them every single opportunity from the beginning of the game to the end, or some people just can't get 2 stars relationships, or there's a new game plus mechanic. It really does seem like there might be a new game plus time rewind mechanic that exists where you can just hang out with people. And it is weird, to say the least, because I was getting more story with every time I hung out with somebody. So it was hardly a case where you could have wasted your hangout ability, and I almost feel like they would have excuse me, it feels like they almost would have intentionally warned you if you could hang out with somebody. In a funny way, even though I've been doing my very best to get presents, I guess I'm trying to get one of everything, and that might be contradictory as far as the gifts that you can get with the Monokuma coins, when it might have been smarter to just get a whole bunch of duplicates. And again, it kind of feels like maybe there's going to be a new game plus concept there, because you can give duplicate gifts. So once you figure out, if you're lucky enough to figure out what somebody likes and you have 5-6 copies of it, just give 5-6 copies of the same present. There's quite a few gameplay mechanics there that that simply are just kind of missing. Like, well, no, missing's the wrong word. There's a lot of gameplay mechanics there that are unnecessary. There's a lot of points in Danganronpa where it's making you walk to a specific place for no real reason. It would make a lot more sense for you to simply have been trapped in a linear storyline progression, and if they wanted you to have the opportunity to talk to somebody, they should just pop up a prompt in that linear progression, not actually have you walk around the 3D environment. And the 3D environment, I'm sure they were enthusiastic about it, and that's why it exists. But I can't help but feel like that had they not done 3D modeling, they would have had more time to do more of a flat 2D game, like a point-and-click adventure, which would have let them have more animation and more budget for voice acting, and maybe even more budget for writing, because some of the writing is definitely painting yourself into a corner or thinking backwards to just ensure that there is a successful murder mystery later on. So there's definitely some overemphasis on things that obviously are going to be involved in the murder mystery later. Pretty much anytime something is said twice, you know that that's going to come up in play. And it makes the whole game feel like it really is targeted to some 14-year-old, some edgy 14-year-old, which is weird, certainly when you think about it, that it's a bunch of high school kids killing each other. And you'd think that would be closer to adult age type game. But I guess in Japan they aren't that prudish.
Breach of contract, huh?
Okay.
Mankind's tenacity will exterminate you, vermin.
Excuse me.
Settle this, you evil blood. You don't belong here.
I'll see you in purgatory.
And because my network was offline, I just set my thermostat, which probably would have followed the previous schedule anyways. But I just set it to be fairly high consistently. So, like I woke up with probably more congestion than normal just by the heater blowing dust around my house. Let's move on with video game news, because there's no real reason to delay it. Also, I'll say the chat is giving me trouble again, probably because of the router default settings, but I don't even know why that would be the case. So I probably won't be able to see the chat until we are done with the entire stream. So if somebody does comment in the chat today, and I don't respond, apologies. And yeah, having the heater turned up higher did end up having me wake up later and sleep in later, so that's a factor certainly to the late
Time to get started.
that's a factor into the late start. Here we have a tweet. The ESA for high-tech jobs is on the rise in 2021 according to LinkedIn. I don't know how many people really use LinkedIn. I think in particular I would warn any new student or new to the workforce or returning to the workforce person to not rely super heavily on LinkedIn. Have a LinkedIn, definitely. It's probably a decent place to build a resume and start up, but what you often have as a effect of LinkedIn, as far as my experience, is you'll have 3-4 recruiters all being hired to fill a job that's probably a temporary job and not that good of a job, contacting you via LinkedIn to offer you a job that's often nowhere in where you live, and you're often not particularly even close to qualified or interested in that job. The sad truth is, knowing somebody and cronyism is still by far the best case scenario and the recommended way to get employment in the United States. Beyond that, going into a store and filling out applications, often in bigger businesses, get you pushed back to a website, but it also will at least let you potentially set a good impression first and foremost, or see who works there. Of course, that's if it's a retail store. Going to an office and asking for an application can be somewhat shady, and I wouldn't really recommend that.
Breach of contract.
Truth of the matter is, it's just kind of, there's no one right way to get a job, because it's so difficult to get jobs, particularly when they're particularly good jobs. And yeah, I imagine that's going to be even more so the case once the pandemic starts wrapping up and more people will try to enter the workforce. Although we may have a lot of people who are just going to work from home, and that might make employment and hiring a little bit easier. Maybe not. That's all something I guess we'll have to speculate about later. I'm still trying to play my cell phone game Destiny Child, and we're in a specific event right now where it is all about spending up your stamina without actually requiring a lot of stamina, so that means the game has to kind of run non-stop, which that's fine.
I've been training hard for this day.
So yeah, I'm trying to
I have to get strong.
get everything
Stronger than I am
done.
I'm here, just like I said in my tip-off note.
that should make enough free space in my inventory on my cell phone game so that I can continue it going. There we go. Now I'm putting down the phone. Yeah, going quiet and playing 2 games at the same time is certainly no way to get things done or even be particularly professional.
Please steal responsibly.
Alright. Might as well evolve here and see if I can save myself, but I can't, obviously.
You have summoned the blade of purgation here.
Alright, so let's just cover video game news since I don't really have anything else to talk about. Danganronpa in particular is going to be kind of impossible to talk about while I'm still playing it because I don't want to spoil it too much, and since I've already seen Game Grumps spoil a lot to me, I'm spoiled on it a lot too. But I did manage to have at least enough self-control to not watch any more of Game Grumps when the newest episode came out. I hope that holds, because there is that big danger. I guess it is also worth pointing out that there's a rhythm section that's introduced particularly late at the end of the first chapter, which is 15-16 hours into the game. And yeah, it really sucks, and unless there's a way to set the difficulty, change the difficulty on the main menu, I am not good at it. So I was getting like all A ranks, and I am hoping there aren't S ranks in the class trial sections, but each little mini game of the class trial I was getting A ranks, and then they wrecked me by putting in the rhythm game at the end, and then I got like a C. There are skills you get, so perhaps at some point I can get a skill that will significantly slow down the time on the rhythm game, because everything else seems to be slowed down quite a bit. So the 2 skills I had already gotten before the beginning of the first chapter's class trial must be helping me quite a lot. Which you wouldn't expect it to be that big of a swing, but apparently it is. We have a TechRaptor article here. A game-making game called Creta goes free to play and is coming to PC. This almost feels like an advertisement than an actual announcement that's worth it while. Apparently Creta is a game-making game. But we've seen so many of those, and so many of them have pretty much failed miserably. Because frankly, you cannot put a cake inside of a cake. Well, you can, but you cannot put a bigger cake or an equal-sized cake inside of a cake. What I mean by this tortured analogy is you're never going to be able to dumb down a game-making software like Unreal or Unity or anything like that, and then with that dumbed-down interface, make it easier for people to use and more powerful, or just as powerful as if they were using Unreal or Unity or any other engine directly. It just can't ever happen. It's an illogical loop. So you are then effectively, because that can never happen, and I'll stand by that promise. Then you are making the logical fallacy arguments that everything in an engine like Unreal or Unity, everything in those programming interfaces integrated development environments, IDEs, you're making the argument then that some of that is not important, or some of that is worthless, or some of that isn't useful, and none of that is true. So
I won't hurt you. I won't hurt you. Too much.
so yeah, there is no cutting of the fat in a programming language, really. Like there's a reason everything is there. If Unity or Unreal or any other IDE could make things easier, they would make things easier. They try very, very hard to do that.
I'll do whatever is in my power.
So yeah, unless you're, well, even like Lego Worlds, which would be about the only one that I would actually argue maybe had done a great job with it, because it was so limited in its focus. I mean, Lego Worlds wasn't well received and wasn't that great. Minecraft might be the closest thing where you can kind of make games in it while still heavily limiting it down to
Get my blood pumping.
let's see, 4 damage.
Hey, check this out.
The whole animal kingdom. My stomach. The hunt is
Yeah.
on.
Like the Sackboy game on the PlayStation, they tried very hard to make something like that work, and it didn't work for most people. Or even like Mario Maker kind of fails in a lot of ways to open itself up greatly to making new Mario games, and thus it limits itself to laying out new Mario levels and nothing else. And I guess in general what that boils down to is the argument that video games are hard, and they kind of have to be hard if you want them to be good. Programming video games is hard. Yeah, I feel like my voice is annoying me particularly this week. I'll put this as a side note. Like, reading all of Danganronpa and then having it not do a great job of indicating who's speaking. Like, all the text in Danganronpa is in the exact same place, and it just very subtly changes who is speaking by changing the name at the top. So I'm not like doing funny voices like Game Grumps or anything like that, and they've totally turned it into just a like improv comedy scene, and they're just not taking the game seriously, which in all fairness maybe that is a way, I won't say the better way, but it may be a valid way to play a game like Danganronpa, is to not take it particularly seriously.
I want to hear your melody.
But yeah, Danganronpa by default does not make it obvious who is speaking. It also has blue text where with the main character thinking. They could definitely have changed the background a little bit more. If you were colorblind, you wouldn't even know there was a difference, I would imagine. But yeah, throughout all of that, I'm just reading it out loud with my normal voice, and hearing yourself talk that much is starting to irritate me. It feels gravelly and tired, and just everything that are worn out. I just woke up. I have a huge amount of congestion voice, sounds like, and yeah. Normally I can turn a blind eye to that, and on rare occasions somebody will complain about it. But yeah. Also, I imagine it is very much the case that people's own voices, particularly when you're wearing headphones and hearing yourself, becomes way more annoying over time than anyone else's voice. It's frankly probably a bit of a miracle that I didn't immediately recoil in horror when I set up my
You don't belong here.
headphones and microphones. Because I totally do hear myself, and that's one way I regulate the volume, because my headphones are sound isolating enough that if I turned down my headphone volume, it would sound like I was speaking and nothing was coming out, and that is much more disturbing a thing to happen. Alright, well, you know, if we do this, something, I don't know, it's gonna happen. Okay.
You don't belong here. Things I do for fashion.
See. Moving on with the news, I need to hurry up. I need to start moving. Totally reliable delivery service developer is among 3 studios that have been acquired by TinyBuild. So we're 5 games. Black Skylines creator Hungry Couch and Cartel Tycoon maker Moon Moose have all been acquired by TinyBuild, which seems weird because I kind of felt like TinyBuild had just been acquired by the Embracer Group, but maybe that was Asper Media or some other company.
Are you as excited as I am? Well, are you?
Alright, well.
You don't
Let's
belong
go
here.
get rid of that.
I'm not afraid of the light. You
Go
don't
get rid of
belong here.
that.
Blow on, dear wind.
Do this.
If you want me to hurt you, just say the word. I'm gonna scoop out your guts. I'm so
Fashion.
There we go. That worked better than I thought it would. Here we have a game on Steam called Emberglass. Yeah, this new suspender plugin, I've since whitelisted it to just not suspend any of the Chrome tabs, and so very little of it is going to be suspended now, which means the thumbnails should all be loaded up and the pages should all be loaded up so I can move faster. This game, it's not the greatest of graphics, and then you have these keyboard prompts, and the actual gameplay itself looks very much like it's an attempt at an NES style game, or at least it's the quality of an NES style game. So I just don't think there's enough here. $5.09, English only, 23 achievements. I think the heads-up display always on the screen for something of this resolution is going to be a mistake. They're calling it a non-linear Metroidvania open-world design with lots of items and puzzles. That's the kind of description you get from somebody who is trying to sell something that doesn't really exist a lot of the times. All right, let's go ahead and evolve here.
check this out.
And do we have Wrath? We do have Wrath.
Allow me to bestow a crimson kiss. Melt under my
Get
touch.
that. Get that
Such a lovely couple.
in the turn. And
You have summoned the blade of purgation here.
yeah, but see, at this point, this is like the only point where you could actually start to win, and you've played all your cards. So this deck is really not that
I'll see you.
good.
Are you as excited as I am? Well, are you?
Foul forces of
Tech
darkness,
Raptor has an
bow
article
before my
here.
tempest.
It appears Among Us update was accidentally released. I don't know what the deal with the tiny scroll bar is like I reset the whole Chrome and it seems like sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So as far as auto hiding the scroll bar, so I may have to just find a different plugin that is perhaps more effective at this, because yeah, it's, I mean, unless there's something I could do to zoom out the page to get the scroll bar to disappear, which it seems like there is no way to do that. Yeah. But this is a tab I definitely did just open after resetting Chrome and updating it.
Let's defile the battlefield.
Alright. Which one has drain? This one?
Okay, this one's all me. I'm sick of being a faceless squirrel.
This.
Blow on, dear wind.
And that.
Daisy.
Blow on, dear wind.
So yeah, what's the idea of Among Us being released on Switch is a genius idea. It's the thing that should happen. So you'd almost feel like if it was accidentally released, you should just say, "Oh, well, that's our bad, but we'll leave it up and we'll just take the money," unless this is a case where they actually have somebody stole the source code and released it as their own game when they didn't have the rights to it.
I love the chaos.
Which that might be the case.
I'm coming for
Yeah,
you.
reading the article actually here, it says a little earlier than intended, so they were going to release it on the Switch. If anything, they should have already had it on the Switch, particularly Among Us, because it's not like that's a new game. It's an old game that just has gained new popularity, so if they had moved better and maneuvered better, they would have had a Switch version already released, and its popularity would have caused them new sales on day one of it becoming popular. And I guess that is a slight lesson that you now are so built around the idea like you're so built around the idea nowadays that your game might go viral, that you probably
Too much.
should always have your game on as many consoles as possible as soon as possible. But that was the case anyways if you want to get sales, is to have your game as accessible as possible as soon as possible. So, but certainly it is a case of smaller game developers not being able to actually accomplish that. Let's see. Am I gonna actually be able to
Is an
succeed
extension
here?
of myself.
Let's defile the battlefield.
Right.
I love the chaos.
Well, let's kill this.
Promised.
Got your
And
message.
then kill
loud and
this.
clear.
Chaos.
I could have kept that alive.
Whoopsie daisy.
Next, we have a game on Steam here called Isle of the Crown, which just looks like a hex grid game. It's a unique pixelated art style that's kind of hard to immediately criticize, because I could see someone making the argument that this is intentional, but I can say it doesn't look particularly interesting by that art style. This is early access for $4.99 English only, and yeah, because it doesn't look interesting to me, I will move on.
Whoopsie daisy.
I'm just gonna hold back. See, next we have a game on Steam called War Gene. This looks like it's an asset flip game. They're calling it an anime Souls-like futuristic 3D game for $7.99. They're comparing it to Remember Me. English full audio. It does actually kind of feel like it somewhat is like the combo fighting system of Remember Me. Well, seeing this game in action, there's just no visual polish here, and the idea of having so much of the game be white on white really doesn't work. So yeah, we might be in a case where this might actually be like a hidden gem. It's single player, but yeah, I'm not even willing to give it that much of a break. Like at the core of it, it still does feel like you're going to be walking around neon and white areas a lot, just combo fighting people over and over again.
Pain and suffering are what I live for. Bestial howls get my blood pumping.
Go! Go!
The whole animal kingdom is on the menu.
Whoopsie-daisy!
So yeah, and War Gene isn't particularly a great name either. Here we have an IGN article that was suspended and unsuspended quite nicely. How Capcom's designed Resident Evil's village lady Demetrius and why she's so big online. Which, yeah, I mean, if they didn't think for a second, or at least hope that she would have caught people's attention, that would have been ridiculous. This is an interview with the Capcom developers. Like, obviously they wanted her to catch people's attention. They wanted, I imagine, the other vampire women to catch people's attention. Perhaps they weren't 100% thinking it was going to go in a particularly lewd direction, but it did, certainly. But even now, I still don't feel like there's a ton of that could have existed. Alright, we got an actual victory. But yeah, I am of a growing suspicion, though, I would say, that this big lady in Resident Evil Village is going to intentionally have been promoted as somebody that people will get fascinated with, and then she's going to turn into a horrific monster that you fight either near the halfway point of the game or near the end of the game, and it's going to be some kind of grotesque visual horror, and that might kill some of the enthusiasm for it. If you think about Resident Evil 7, that is the one thing that the Western team that worked on that game, or most of that game, kind of didn't focus on. There's a couple of female interests, and you are specifically looking for your missing girlfriend in Resident Evil 7. But yeah, you have like the creepy grandmother character, and then you have quite a lot of male enemies, and there's actually probably an argument that could be made that it's somewhat sexist in the fact of how few female enemies have been in previous Resident Evil games. And yeah, in general, I guess if you think about the Resident Evil series, you have female protagonists that are almost always the secondary character, with the exception of Resident Evil 3, and very, very few bad girls. Even like Resident Evil 5 that did have a bad girl, you basically fight her once or twice. And 7 kind of drops the ball completely there. Maybe you fight one. And since most of the bad people turn into monsters anyways, it really really shouldn't have been that unbalanced. And perhaps Resident Evil Village will go in the opposite direction in such a weird way that we will have complaints when the game actually comes out that all the bad guys or most of the bad guys are actually bad girls and witches, because it is supposedly supposed to be a game about witches. So yeah, this is going to be, I think, a more female-centric group of enemies. So prepare yourself, I imagine, for claims for SJW woke articles claiming that this literally demonizes females. It might be interesting to go through the entirety of all the enemies in there's a lot of there's a lot of, sorry, I was typing there. There's a lot of animals also in Resident Evil, so that would be another point to split there, is that I imagine we will see let's see. Apparently there's a game called RE: Monsters.
Hold up your swords with pride.
How dare you?
Okay.
How dare you?
So yeah, if we were to look at just Wikipedia here, you have zombies. How many zombies are female zombies in Resident Evil games, particularly Resident Evil 1? Maybe none, maybe a small percentage.
Stand down.
How many zombies are female zombies in even the Resident Evil 2 remake? Probably not that many. You have hunters, Cerberus, wasp, giant spiders, chimera, plant 42, yawn, adder. I don't know who all these are. Crimson heads.
Hold up your swords with pride.
But yeah, definitely not a lot of that even seems like it's mostly humans. It's mostly animals. And then for Resident Evil 2 and 3, you have the T-103, which is probably the main bad guy that follows you. Then lickers and cockroaches and poison ivies and moths and G-larvas and alligators and brain suckers, drain demons, grave diggers, and a sliding worm. Again, at that point, mostly more around the idea of, let's see.
Are you as excited as I am? Well, are you?
Allow me to bestow a crimson kiss.
Go! Go!
Yeah, mostly around fighting monsters. Sorry,
Scoop out your cup. How dare you?
I played that wrong.
Should have been quicker.
You wouldn't.
Yeah, mostly around animals. Then you get to Code Veronica. You have a albinoid, an ant, a bandersnatch, gulpworm, infected bat, Nosferatu, and parasite. Then you get to Resident Evil 0. You have the Mimicry Marcus / Leech Zombie, which I think that was a human that turned into a Leech Zombie. Eliminator, Plague Crawler, Lurker, Leech, Centurion, Stinger. Almost, like, the way the zombies happen, almost all the only humanoid zombies you even see are mostly around zombies. Then Resident Evil Dead Aim is a game I don't even recognize that had Nautilus and Torpedo Kids, Pluto, Queen Bee, maybe a human there. Then the Outbreak series, you have an Axeman, zombie hyena, a character named Dorothy who's probably female, I kind of need to see pictures of this. And then Resident Evil 4 seems to have completely no list at all. And then Resident Evil 5 has Majini, Matured Las Plagas, Crocodiles, Bowie, Kiwachi, Reaper. So yeah, I kind of wish there was pictures that loaded up here. Yeah. And also it doesn't talk about 6 and it doesn't talk about 7. Why do we not have pictures loading? Let me turn off the blockers and see if that would have pictures come up. Nope, I think I am just not in a good place right now with my network, so pictures seem like they just aren't going to load. So yeah, without particularly reading this entire article to see how many monsters, although this is a list of creatures, so perhaps if I had type in people or characters, that might be a better way to go down this route. So, yep, another arena run. We didn't qualify, but we can now play Bloodcraft or Runecraft, and I think I'll just stick with Bloodcraft and try and get 2 victories. Which I think that would be unlimited. Nope. Not unlimited rotation. Well, pictures line up here. No, I would like something more visual. How could we? Okay. Well, let's just use Google here, I suppose. So here's the list of Resident Evil characters. We can see we have Chris Redfield, Leon S. Kennedy, Jill Valentine, Albert Wesker, Claire Redfield, and Ada Wong. Is Claire Redfield and Chris Redfield, I guess they are related? Rebecca Chambers, she was not used well. Then you have the Tyrant as a character, which I assume you'd say that's male. And then we have Sheva, and then we have Sherry Birkin, which I don't know how much of a role she really plays, and William Birkin and Nemesis, again male. And then you have Alice, which, is that even Alice? And then you have a picture here that won't load for Barry Birkin and Liquor, and then you have Alexia Ashford, which is a character I don't recognize. And then we have Keena Sullivan, I don't recognize. Jack Cruiser, I recognize. Brad Vickers, I don't recognize. Forrest Spire. Anita Birkin, don't recognize. Helen Harper, don't recognize. James Marcus, I don't recognize. William Cohen. I imagine all these characters are from either spin-off things or just they were not the popular RE characters. Certainly you could see a level here that you could have gotten rid of a lot of these characters. Like Steve Burnside here and Mikhail Victor both look like military guy, and you could easily have eliminated some characters there. But I guess at a certain point, if you're going to introduce bad guys, they are going to have to be they are going to have to be eliminated in that specific game. Here we have Lisa Trevor, which the heads are getting cut off on half of these images, and Moira Barton, the head's cut off. Carlos Olivia, Ethan Winters. Like, some of these characters I think may have literally just been mentioned. more and more guys. Alex Wesker, Excella. Excella was in Resident Evil 5, and she was the bad girl, and you see a lot of her. You can also see that, like, the depiction of Excella right now is also in line and similar with the new tall lady, Barry Burton. But yeah, you're getting about a 5-to-1 ratio of male to female. Ingrid Hunnigan, yeah, she was a character, but she really was just a voice on the on the radio. And then you have like Ashley Graham as the main character, the president's daughter you have to save. She's not done a great job of coming back. And Maya Winters. So just a Google search here of, I assume this would be the top tier female and male characters in the game. You can see, yeah, it is pretty much a 5-to-1. At some point they tried to keep it more balanced, but yeah, enemies wise and hero wise, antagonist wise and protagonist wise, the male to female ratio in Resident Evil has historically been pretty bad. Now, does that mean people out there are clamoring and want to have a 50-50 ratio of female enemies and male enemies? Maybe not. Maybe it feels worse to shoot a female zombie than it does to shoot a male zombie. But maybe at a certain point we have to get over that feeling if we're ever going to be egalitarian about anything. It is benevolent sexism more than anything that I imagine has kept Resident Evil so dude-centric, and we're going to probably hear more of that. I guess that is a very long way to just go into a speech about benevolent sexism and just highlight it in the Resident Evil series. And yeah, we will see when Village comes out. Will they bend over backwards to cram female characters in safe spaces so that they can't be shot and can't be attacked? Or will they put in a kind of arbitrary thing where the witches can't be killed? Like, since Village is going to be a story about witches, it would probably be more accurate and wise if you had them show up quite a lot, and then you have to fight them and shoot them and kill them, and then they come back to life, and then they're just like these unkillable, always returning enemies. Kind of like if you were going to have the stalker, the tyrant, chasing you throughout the whole game. Of course, they need to space it out a bit more, and there needs to be transformations and more boss fight feeling experiences. We don't want it to really just be that the big tall lady is just chasing us this whole time like the tyrant. We also need a whole bunch of other monsters, and so definitely they could try and balance it out and have some male servants also show up. But I will definitely want to keep an eye on how many zombies are female versus how many zombies are not female. I assume there are going to be zombies in the game. Although, in all fairness, Resident Evil 7, I don't think it actually had that many zombies, at least in that first half of the game that was made by the Western people. It was just the family. And so they might be doubling down on that idea, and we may very well have just another group of small antagonists that chase you around, and there is no greater zombie element, so that there is not going to be a greater action element, which, if the Resident Evil series completely abandons the action part of the game, that would be a little bit scary, but it might be the smart move too, as there's just constantly more and more zombie games getting created, and more competition for a field of games that are getting less and less attractive with every new day. So yeah, Moving on, Gamer Sutra has an article. Microsoft has created a vault to temporarily house Bethesda's parent company, ZeniMax, which I imagine this is probably closer to a legal firewall than anything. So they've established a subsidiary called Vault as part of the merger process with the parent, with Bethesda parent ZeniMax. So yeah, it's kind of ridiculous that there are these kind of legal filings that have to happen, and it isn't more straightforward and easy to just say, hey, we're going to merge with this company, but whatever. What they might be doing specifically here is creating a subsidiary based out of the European Union, thus then the European Union can't as easily make an argument that it is an American company taking over control of a European company. But yeah, I don't think anybody's really going to believe that. This is kind of unimportant news, to say the least, unless you are deep into the business of video games, unless you work in the industry at a higher level. Even an average programmer has really no need to know that Microsoft has made a subsidiary to acquire Bethesda. All we need to know is, will this acquisition go through or will not? We just need the outcome. And maybe we could get a small update if things are looking bad or things are looking good, but we probably don't even need that because the legal process is so... these kinds of processes are so long and slow and ridiculous anyways. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Customers from Hell, which seems like it's a 3D asset flip tower defense game where you're trying to shoot and stop customers from getting into your supermarket, which, yeah, it certainly does feel different when it's not zombies. Because then the justification here of people trying to get into your store seems not valid. $7.19, third-party EULA, English full audio. That's too expensive for what it's offering. This guy's taking his sweet time to think, or my network is taking its sweet time to play. Both are probably fairly true. But I haven't had any drop frames or anything yet, so as far as the network, so like my experience is not perfect, but it's not awful. That. Let's go ahead and evolve this to get it higher. Hit that.
You don't
And
belong
hit
here.
that.
You don't belong here.
Next we have a game on Steam called Enemy Remains, which looks like it's a top-down shooter. Looks like it's kind of a twin-stick shooter in kind of a Halloween-themed environment. Eaten by mutants. I would be surprised, actually, if at some point we started talking less about zombies and more about mutants. But that's harder to explain, certainly. They're comparing it to Trigger Happy Havoc, which, yeah. This is $8.99, English full audio. Yeah, for a brief second there, I thought Steam's recommendation engine had improved, but seems like, at least for new games, it's still dropping the ball pretty badly on that. Here we have a TechRaptor article. Pokemon is printing more 25th anniversary trading cards, which, okay. Is it really the 25th anniversary, or are they printing old cards? And apparently they were giving these out with McDonald's. I don't know if they're still doing it. Like, what this inherently says, though, is as soon as you start to see a card company acknowledge a secondary market and begin to try and engage with the secondary market. That's the point where you start to run into Magic the Gathering's nonsense, which they've just gone full crazy with that, with as far as manipulating the secondary market and trying to profit off of it. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see, at least at this point, all 25th anniversary Pokemon cards being in such high supply and little demand that they never gain any value. This happened, I think, in the comic book market a lot too, where issues like Spawn issue 1 and just any issue 1 these days are bought by so many speculators and collectors that they will never have any real resale value. Not in one person's lifetime, at least. Perhaps in 200 or 300 years it might matter, but maybe not. Let's see, next we have a game on Steam here called Evade, which is a bullet hell shoot 'em up game that's not animated particularly well. In a weird way, this feels like a Western designer who couldn't draw, thinking they could make a shoot 'em up game. They're not even really getting it at the right scale and zoom. They want $6.99 here. And it's very, very competitive field, I would say, shoot 'em ups, since that's been just so heavily dominated by mostly Japanese developers who mostly do a decent job, I think, for people who want to play those kinds of games. On top of that being a very niche game anyways. I don't think there's a massive amount of people that really want to play that.
Mankind's tenacity will exterminate you, vermin.
Next, we have a game on Steam called Distorted World, which I don't think I can just dismiss as an asset flip. It looks inconsistent, certainly. If anything, if I was going to call this as an asset flip, I'd say it's an asset flip that has just filled its world with so much assets that it's become cluttered and weird looking. Indie first-person shooter with horror elements. The action takes place in a parallel reality. $12.79, English and Russian full audio. I think this is probably closer to a low-effort attempt on a Russian game, but I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and put it on the follow list. And thank goodness, at least so far, I have yet to see a lot of games that have managed to get people to write positive reviews on when they are actually bad games. So I am still fairly safe as far as the idea of using the follow list as a way of curating games. Next we have a game called Whitewash, which is a dangerous name for a game, and it's a Chinese like Zumba clone. It is done in a different way, so I could see maybe an interest here. It doesn't, I think, have controller support. It's $3.99, single player only, English, Japanese, Chinese, Korean. Take your pick on who you're gonna think made this. I kind of like this art style, but I don't like it for this type of gameplay. It seems kind of pointless to have this art style, or even a different art style for what is just a Zumba game. It's kind of pointless to make a Zumba game. Zuma, I think, is how you pronounce it, not Zumba. I think Zumba is an exercise thing.
Allow me to bestow a crimson kiss.
You don't belong here.
TechRaptor has an article. Tales from the Borderlands returns to stores in February of 2021. It came out originally in 2014. It was delisted when Telltale went out of business. The bigger question certainly would be who is publishing it. Is it the new Telltale, or is it 2K or Gearbox? Also, they've come out with Borderlands 3's director's cut is coming out March 18th, 2021, which that's a game that I am not sure really deserves a director's cut, because I don't think it has that fandom. Yeah, it's being labeled as Telltale Games as developer and publisher. I already own it and I've already covered it on my channel, and it would be kind of silly to go back and cover it again. There is one thing certainly to say here that is probably slightly slightly an interesting element here is, I believe, the main character, the male character here that you follow for half of the story. Here they've got Jim Sterling. I don't think we're going to see Jim Sterling quoted in games anymore, or at least I hope, but who knows. But this was the game where they killed off Scooter because of the person who worked at Gearbox and did unpaid voice work for Scooter, basically had cancer or something, and he just stopped working for Gearbox at that point. But the main character here, I believe, was voiced by Chris Hardwick, and Chris Hardwick was canceled, and kind of he's married to a very rich and powerful person in the TV movie industry, so he's hosting The Wall now, but he's not, I think, doing the Talking Dead stuff. Basically all his friends betrayed him. So in the relisting of this, it would be interesting to see if they mention that he is voiced by Chris Hardwick. Nope, nobody's being voiced by anybody is getting mentioned. But we're not seeing any censorship here either. At least so far we haven't seen any censorship. So it would be surprising if it did come back and then Chris Hardwick's voice had been completely redone. They did replace him in Borderlands 3. And honestly, they made the wrong mistake. Oh, Vaughn might have actually been Chris Hardwick, not Reyes. I could be wrong about that. Regardless, there is one character certainly that was voiced by Chris Hardwick. But yeah, I could certainly imagine them thinking about voicing Scooter and bringing that character back in some way, even though he is pretty much dead. They could bring him back easily, but I don't also want to open the door of bringing back a character such as Handsome Jack, because there's just been too much Handsome Jack already in the story. So yeah, Tales from the Borderlands introduced quite a lot of characters, and I would argue very few of those characters actually bothered to show up again in Borderlands 3, and maybe we'll see them in parts in Borderlands 4, which somebody's going to make Borderlands 4. I'm not 100% certain that it is going to be Gearbox. And even if it was Gearbox, I'm not 100% certain that the people who worked on Borderlands 1 or 2 are even still working at Gearbox. And even if they were, at a certain point you might have just such a compound disinterest of the developers that they may not be particularly hyped to make Borderlands 4. That does definitely get into the bonus and performance bonuses now that Gearbox has been acquired by Embracer Group, is the idea to get those bonuses would be that Gearbox is going to have to come out with 2 or 3 games in a AAA games in a very short amount of time and be particularly successful with that. And there might be some scenarios in which that happens, because I wouldn't be surprised one bit if Gearbox did come out with 1 or 2 games and put them on the Epic Games Store as exclusives, and because they were exclusives, they got paid up front a lot of money earlier on to make then those performance goals to get bonuses to line the pockets of Randy Pitchford, the CEO of Gearbox, more than anything else. Like, there is definitely a scam that easily could be had here, in which you could convince Epic Games Store to potentially pay money up front earlier than it normally would earn just by actual sales to meet performance goals in a timely manner. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Azerium, which is kind of a pretty forest area, and then kind of a disconnected building. And yeah, it kind of feels like this is a Russian asset flip looking at the interiors. Yeah, forest alone certainly does not make a game these days. This is $12.74 English Turkish. Oh, I guess that would explain the architectural design of that one building. Yeah, that definitely does look like a Turkish building, but it, as a game, doesn't seem to make as much sense as it should. Alright, let's do this. Do this.
Cutting's tenacity will exterminate you, vermin.
And then do this. And this. See, next we have a game called Caddy and Betty. This looks like this is a keyboard only, just hand-drawn pencil sketch platformer game from the looks of it. Yeah, visually that just does not look good. Yeah, I would have a very hard time seeing this. Oh, it's not even a platformer, is it? It's a puzzle game where you're just redirecting things using blocks. $4.24 English only. Honestly, if this was 69 cents and they told me it was a student project, I would be fine with it. But frankly, it should have been free too. It's like there's just absolutely no quality there. Like a game like Caddy and Betty pretty much should be on itch.io, not on Steam. Gemetzer has an article here. Borderlands 3 DLC Director's Cut launches March 18th. Set in the Multiverse Cosmetic Multi-Packs are also due March 18th. So it's part of Season Pass 2, and so it's kind of pretty much just more of Borderlands 3, whereas I thought Director's Cut by the direction would have been like the Ultimate Edition or yet another Ultimate Edition of Borderlands 3 that would include all the other content, but that's not even what it is. It's an odd name. Borderlands has pretty much always presented itself as a story being told, so it's not 100% confirmed or believable that anything actually is canonical in each main story. So I wouldn't be surprised one bit if Director's Cut is just you playing as alternate universe versions of the main characters of Borderlands 3, and clearly they look like they're dark X-Men style animated, and maybe they're gonna fight darker skinned versions of the enemies. All that might be more interesting, frankly, because that is what Borderlands was going to be originally. It was just going to be a standard Unreal Engine first-person shooter that looked like Call of Duty and didn't have the cel-shaded art style, and probably did not have any level of comedy or just general personality that Borderlands has. Of course, you could make the argument now that Borderlands 3's personality may have shifted a little bit far away from what Borderlands 1 and Borderlands 2 personality is, and so, or times may just have changed, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's less of an argument nowadays to play a Borderlands game because of its personality.
With this payment, darkness stands with
Rough
you.
stuff.
Let's see. Dire Bond.
Let your soul succumb to the void.
I still have yet to buy Borderlands 3 or play it, and I don't imagine I'm going to play Borderlands 3 for at least 6 months to a year, if not longer. I still have the pre-sequel to play. Also.
What was sown has been reaped.
I have no idea what to make of this game. Here we have a game called Hard Tapes, which they're calling a psychological horror, which is about sick thought experiments that have been seen thanks to some videotapes. So it's kind of like the movie 8mm. There seems to be a lot of shooting, a lot of people in bikinis, and then you have different images here that, like, this is very reminiscent of Saw. And then you have a pig mask that's reminiscent of Saw, and then dirty hallways, and then like torsos or body bags, and then a hall that seems very reminiscent of PT, and then creepy mannequins. So yeah, I don't know really what game this is, if there is an actual game here or not. It's free. It's English and Spanish, Latin America. This would be weird if this turned out to be this is the new way. I'm going to put this on the follow list because I want to see some reviews. It's a demo. If this was the new way that Spanish horror movie writers and movie makers tried to make their films with that, because it was just cheaper and required less actors and such, that would be an interesting companion to some of the Spanish horror movies, because there are things like 8mm, and I imagine there's a few other Central American, South American, Latin American horror movie developers out there that are aspiring and actually talented. Which I guess you could say that pretty much for a lot of Latin America in general, is that there's probably a lot of people that have a lot of talent and are aspiring, and they just don't have the resources to produce games or movies or anything else. And that's probably true for a lot of places around the world. It's an unfair system, to say the least. I don't know what we're going to have happen here,
How are you?
but we'll kill that.
Are you as excited as I am? How are you? I'm so excited!
I need to hurry up. I've been going an hour and 24 minutes, and I don't want to go long today, in particular, since I started late. Gametsu has an article here. Akiba's Trip, Hellbound and Debriefed, the HD game, launches this summer in the West, and so we now have some bundles here. It's interesting. It's only PS4 and Switch, and yeah, I don't know. Having to buy a new router, that probably blew my budget more than likely as far as ever getting a Nintendo Switch. That really sucks, but unfortunately things break and they have to be replaced, and that does often eat into your budget.
Bestial howls get my blood pumping.
Plus you always should be trying to save up more.
Animal genius on the mend.
Some sort of imbecile.
Interesting. I did not realize that was going to do that. I have no idea what that even was.
Allow me to bestow a crimson kiss.
Check out my fancy footwork.
The hunt is on.
Wow.
Get ready to fly.
Wow. That was quite the victory. Finally.
I did it. I won.
Yeah. It's been pretty much a week, if not a week and a half, to try and get those 7 victories, to finally get those daily quests all done. So now we are just done with daily quests. Let's battle again with this deck since it just won, and then let's just kind of try and randomize it some more, as I'm going to try and go through the rest of the news. Here we have a game called Doors of Insanity. It's a deck builder RPG. It actually looks animated decently well. It's a little random in its theming, but maybe that's a good thing. Early access, $13.99, English, Russian, Chinese. Normally that combination of languages is a concern, but I'll put it on the follow list. I mean, this does not look terrible by any means. If anything, it might be a cell phone game. It has online PvP, but no in-app purchases or DLC, so that's intriguing too. Tech Raptor has a review here for a game called Destruction All Stars,
Time to get
which
started.
This one's for
is
my
something I
family.
haven't heard of. They're giving it a 7.0. Sony's latest first-party title is fantastic fun, but it needs more balancing and more content. Pro's fantastic showcase of power of the PS5, genuine fun gameplay loop, charming characters and visuals. Cons, microtransactions are invasive, it's lacking much content, and it needs balancing. This looks like a new Rydo too. I don't recognize that picture. I imagine this is like a Tuesday night football, Friday night football type game where you're just running around like fighting people and maybe crashing cars too. So it might be like a destruction derby. But yeah, being specifically a first party Sony title, it's not going to come to PC, so I don't have to care about it that much anyways. And yeah, whenever I have to play my cell phone game to get raids, that's the thing that takes a lot of time, because the raids pop up and you have to join the raid before other people play it and defeat it for you, and then you can't make progress.
Allow me to bestow a crimson kiss.
This is a surprising list here. We have Dying Light has been listed again on Steam via What's on Steam. I already own this game. So this isn't Enhanced Edition. So what I think may have happened here is, well, Enhanced Edition is a bundle of things, and there's still a bunch of other things you could clearly get. I probably don't need them. Either Dying Light has been labeled now no longer being in early access, where it was in early access before, or they just delisted the main version for an enhanced version. Like, I have the enhanced version, which that I think is pretty much all the important DLC, whereas this Ultimate Collection is, yeah, seemingly just cars and bundles. And yeah, I don't think there's crossover content here too.
Allow me to bestow a crimson kiss.
I'm trying to think for a second to make sure that this is the game I think it is. Too. Yeah, this is Techland's, the people who created Dead Island 1, what they went on to make. Yeah, this is the game I'm thinking of. I should get around to playing that. It's from 2015. Yeah, I'm still playing like five-year-old games, and that works for the budget very well though. And also, I've been playing more and more visual novels, so I'm going in a different direction in that route. Although I need to not go too deep into that route. Also, I need to, if I'm gonna go that direction, I need to decide instead to cover some visual novels. I mean, not visual novels, JRPGs instead. TechRaptor has an article here, and I can see the beginning of the end. Magic the Gathering has announced a secret layer Smitten Quant drop for Valentine's Day. And this is a great example of Magic the Gathering manipulating the secondary market by selling these secret layer cards that are particularly limited edition custom art cards at a very, very high price directly. Here we can see they have gone with a very colorful fairy art style. Although, in all fairness, I would say this art style and this art style are different to me. This feels like this has a much brighter color palette and sharper details and resolutions, where this is more of a softer palette and a more toned down detail. So it feels like this is 4 or 5 different artists that were told to draw something similar and came out with something different. And then here we have some cards that completely are disconnected with that. I'd like to actually see the price on this, just point it out, but TechRaptor has kind of failed to mention a price. So I guess it's my duty as someone who's trying to actually be a news reporter to click on the link and check the price myself. And that sucks.
As promised.
Melt under my
Go to contract hours.
melt under my touch.
Finish the job.
So yeah, here's the secret layer listings. And they're highlighting them all being foiled. They're selling, I think, each individual card. Some more art here. I imagine some of these are going to be random too. And it does seem like you can only just sign up. They're not even telling you a price. Let's go learn more. Alright, so the All of Our Love bundle is $259.91 to get 5 cards. Or you can buy a showcase of 3 cards for $35 or $25. I assume that you're getting 3 cards since that's what they're showing, but then there's also this warning in the screen. And then, yeah, Valentine's Day 2021 Foil Edition is $39, which, like, you're talking 6 cards for $39, and unfortunately that is the price that they've Magic the Gathering cards up to. It's ridiculous. If there is anything, let me just end by saying this, if there's anything that should die and go away and never come back because of this current pandemic, it is Magic the Gathering's overpriced card games. Like, I would, in general, love to see if Hasbro just have Hasbro itself just go out of business and everything that they own be open sourced for people to make their own cards, make their own cardboard games.
Are you as excited as I am? I'm so excited!
Moving on, we have a Gamma Citra article. Epic Games' new MetaHuman creator will let devs build hi-fi humans. So apparently the Unreal Engine is going to have this plugin where it's going to potentially let you create, using sliders, better looking custom characters at higher resolutions. In a lot of ways, this is just stepping up what already exists in many games, but having this potentially be available to game developers will potentially have us have better looking characters. The bigger question I would say, though, is how many games would implement a metahuman created using that, and using the phrase metahuman is stupid, but I'll stick to it for the purpose of this argument. How many game developers out there are going to let you take a custom character in your game that you make, export it to some kind of standardized file, and then implement it in a different game? Because if I made my perfect character in Skyrim, for instance, I could see a lot of people wanting to take their Skyrim character and taking it to some other games, or taking it specifically to the next Elder Scrolls game, and we've just had no cross compatibility whatsoever as far as custom characters. Xbox tried to do it with avatars, Nintendo Wii tried to do it with Mii's, and it went absolutely nowhere. And that has been in the past because of a lack of cooperation between game developers. And the only thing that's different now is technology is easier, and people are more online. I could see if you could make a PewDiePie metahuman, I could see PewDiePie using that character in every single game that worked with, if they allowed cross compatibility in the way of moving it around, but I bet they don't. I bet this is much more a case where game developers are going to use it to make the characters they like to look at and put their own biases and preferences in it, and that's it. But overall, that still will improve the graphics as far as how people look. Although, I don't know if most games are even zoomed in enough where you would notice. Alright, deal 4 damage to an enemy. So who are we gonna kill? That one? And then what? Evolve this.
This one's all me. I'm sick of being a faceless whoopsie-daisy.
That.
Allow me to take
And
my
then
cut.
I just gotta protect myself more, so I'm gonna hit that. Next, we have a game on Steam called Appease the Spider, which clearly is just an asset flip horror game, dark screenshot. It's 99 cents English only. They're comparing it to Cuphead. Laughable. Cuphead is airing on my channel, which is... I suspect I'll probably get some guff for that one, because I didn't actually make it all the way to the end. I kind of rage quit it on the last two bosses who you can't beat. There's just no way to play them. Cuphead's a hard game. Not as hard as I think everyone made it out, but hard enough to the point where I couldn't beat it. So I had to admit defeat and just say, well, for the parts I did manage to engage in, I enjoyed it well enough, I think was my final response there. Let's see. Moving on, we have a Gematsu article. The Super NES and NES games, or more of those, are being added to Nintendo Switch Online. They're adding Doomsday Warrior, Prehistoric Man, Psycho Dream, and Fire and Ice on February 17th. This is particularly in Japan, so some of these may not be in the West. Prehistoric, Doomsday Warrior, Psycho Dream, Fire and Ice. Yeah, so it's, yeah, same 4 games, different logos in the West too. Alright. You can pretty much see, though, that Nintendo has already run out of games that it can even suggest, because or even port, because they've pretty much done all their good first party titles, and they're not going to get a bunch of agreements from third party developers to emulate those old games. It's just not worth negotiating, really. So that whole concept is kind of dead in the water. Ryan Watt, who has been on parental leave, who for a long time now, but he's kind of working. He's the head of gaming and commerce at YouTube, which it used to say head of YouTube gaming, and so that's changed. Anyways, he tweeted out he's expanding his team. He's looking to bring on an executive role here at YouTube to run the game publishers team and my commerce team, director, publishers, and commerce. If anything, it seems like he's basically trying to find somebody to replace a lot of the work he's probably doing. This role will report directly to him. So if you want to work for Google and YouTube, which is, I think, a big if, and you are an executive level person who happens to be watching my YouTube stream for some reason, check that out. Otherwise, don't bother applying, I would say, because you're not going to get it, and I imagine they're going to comb through any applications with a fine-tooth comb. There is an argument, certainly. If you need a job, get a job. Don't worry too much about the company you're working for if you're about to starve to death. That is the nature of capitalism, is that you end up having to compromise your morals just to survive. But also there's an argument to maybe you could get, particularly in an exec level position like that, if someone smart, intelligent, and who wasn't just a flaming SJW started working at YouTube, maybe they could try and fix a lot of the problems with YouTube and try and actually address the needs, in particular in this case, of video game streamers who do make up a large percentage of YouTube's creators. Whether YouTube cares about them or not is a different argument. It seems like they really don't. In that same vein, we have a job listing here from HB Studios as a senior producer. This is in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, Canada. I don't know this company, HB Studios, though, so I wouldn't be surprised if HB stands for honeybee. Let's see. For a brief time there, is this the one where it's like Clash reduces it? Yeah, darn it. keep forgetting about that card. I hate this card so much. Like, this is basically the first card I've ever seen in any card game that I want to see nerfed, personally. Game of Switch has an article. The Riot Games CEO is accused of sexual harassment in a lawsuit from an ex-employee. Innocent until proven guilty and all of that. They're alleging a pattern of inappropriate comments, sexual advances, and eventual professional retaliation. Yeah, well, it is believable on both sides, like, and that's where you have to just assume nothing and not even really think about these accusations until it goes to a real lawsuit. I will applaud Sharon O'Donnell, the person filing the lawsuit, for actually filing the lawsuit instead of just coming out on Twitter and trying to cancel Riot Games CEO. We did have a brief moment there in which the whole accusations and cancelings and revelations of bad behavior of video game companies had died down, and I guess we might start building that back out until they can finally clean out the cesspool that it seems like the video game industry. And I imagine it's probably not too much different anywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of businesses all over the place have some really bad atrocities occurring or have occurred. So, like, yeah.
Nice marksmanship.
She was an executive assistant from 2017 to 2020. Executive assistant being a fancy term for a secretary. So yeah, both of the cliche stories are believable. It could be the CEO is perfectly innocent and this is just a lawsuit to get money because someone was fired or didn't get a promotion or just left the company. Or it could be the exact opposite, and it could be that the CEO is a horrific sexist. Although in this one, the accusations aren't even particularly that extreme so far. It's inappropriate comments, sexual advances, and professional retaliation. And at a certain level, if I think about how I would probably treat some people that are jerks or giving me guff or just bad at their jobs, a lot of that, like, probably could be claimed as harassment too. And at a certain point, I just don't know if you can even run a business unless you just have the perfect employees that you never have to discipline and you never have to comment on their work, unless they're just doing perfect work. I don't know how you can 100% make sure you're always within professionalism and that not feel like harassment to somebody. Like, I've definitely had bosses that I felt like were just yelling at me and being unprofessional many times, and I almost certainly would assume that they thought they were being completely professional, and frankly, nobody wants to be told that they're doing something wrong. Nobody wants to be disciplined. Nobody wants to be yelled at. So inappropriate comments can be quite a lot of different things and very subjective. Sexual advances, that's a little bit more clear cut, but also, like, I could see letting your guard down for a second and saying a dirty joke, and then all of a sudden someone's trying to cancel you over saying a dirty joke. That is part of the problem, where you potentially have to just always be on your toes. And remember, your coworkers are not your friends. They are not your buddies hanging out at a bar. But yeah, it is very hard to have that tensed muscle to be professional all the time. And frankly, it doesn't even work, because I have definitely worked in jobs where I personally have had that tensed muscle of being professional and going, like, I'm going to be the most professional person here. I'm going to look out and see how everyone else is not professional. And all that really did is kind of ostracize me as not being quote unquote a team player or not being like the rest of the group, because I was actually trying to be professional and everybody else wanted to just goof around and have a good time. But see, it's almost a catch-22 where had I joined the other direction and said, all right, well, everybody's a goof around having a good time, there was at least one boss in that's going to show up at least at some point that says, why are these people such goof offs? Well, at least that's usually how that goes. Let's see. Got all kinds of puppets. And they don't have a way of...
All I need's an opening and you're toast. Now the fight begins. Sorry, but the time for games is over.
So yeah, we'll have to leave that story as where it is, because we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Next we have a game on Steam here called GameCoon Input Challenge, which, yeah, this just seems like it's a button like rhythm game. It's animated in a decent thought though, but there really isn't a game here, and it does just kind of feel like a low effort development. It's English only, which is weird because then there's some Asian writing on the controller. It almost feels like an attempt at doing something like the WarioWare games, but the WarioWare games just would not work if it was just one mini game, and that's all this is for $2.99. That's just way too expensive. Alright. Okay. Puppets. I could do 5 here.
By the storm.
And then I can do 2 here. Just puppet bomb it. That's the easiest way to accomplish that. Yeah. Need to hurry up. Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, promoted this. YouTube has earned accreditation for protecting advertisers from unsuitable videos. This is apparently some new company that is given a accreditation, the Media Rating Council, which I guess this is the back end, the reward Susan Wojcicki gets for effectively ruining YouTube by protecting the advertisers. I wouldn't be surprised one bit also if this is just the Media Rating Council is literally just a company that would have given accreditation to anyone had they paid enough. Okay.
One step at a time.
Let's see.
I can do this.
You're through.
We can do this together.
In that. Certainly it doesn't really mean anything to a YouTuber streamer that YouTube is getting some kind of award. If anything, it's a spit in the face that YouTube would get any kind of award, because they don't really deserve it. Nobody is happy with YouTube, and don't think for a second that advertisers are particularly happy that they have to do business with YouTube. They would much prefer to be doing businesses with cable stations and TV stations, not just news but everything. things that they can influence and control a lot more. Well, this could make a 6 occur. I could do 3 damage, which can't do anything. I can put this on the field, or I can do this.
Feeling better? Then come and jam with me.
What? Why didn't that work? I don't have a follower that cost 6 that I'd played. Yeah, that's why. That didn't work. I think we'll play one more game because I think we'll run into some news while we're wrapping up. And still, we're not going to even go that long today. Game Master Classified Kickstarter explores Nintendo's early days by Howard Phillips. Apparently, Howard Phillips is someone of importance. Nintendo's one-time employee and super fan Howard Phillips is writing basically a book, which I've read like one book about Nintendo in its early days, and that's probably all you would ever need to read. And frankly, you probably don't even need to read that much. It's much better to live in the now instead of live in the nostalgia of the then, and reading books like that is a nostalgia of the then. It's a little bit different with like history books, when you're reading about like World War I or the Civil War. Those are things that aren't still going on, or arguably or mostly not still going on. Some might argue the Civil War is still being fought in the minds of many people in the United States. But when you're talking about just what a company did, it feels very capitalistic, and when you're talking about Nintendo, you're getting a very unique slice of Nintendo's history anyways. I would be much more interested to know more of their history, if you could even get a true telling of that history, of their experience as a company before 1983 and when they released like Donkey Kong. So when they were when they were making Game & Watches, when they were making bowling alleys, when they were making laser light things, when they were making other kinds of toys. At one point they were making Lego knockoffs. When they go back to making like Hanafuda cards, that is the stories that you'd have to interview Japanese people to get the history from that, and it probably wouldn't be much of a true history, and that's just not what gets written about. They make it seem like Nintendo started when Nintendo of America started, and they make it seem like Nintendo of America really has been running the show this whole time, when in actuality they've actually been doing very little in just kind of localizing the Japanese Nintendo's developments. Moving on, we have a Gamma Sutra article. Profits dip at Bandai Namco despite rising game sales, which this probably highlights the issue of Bandai Namco just doing several other things in general. So like I imagine their anime section content is lacking in sales this quarter, and I imagine if they own any other kind of business segments, that's probably lacking too.
There's nothing corny about my message. It looks like I'm
So, yeah. I'm surprised I got that to work. TechRaptor has an article here. A free Hearthstone core set and new classic format has been announced, which is weird because they already had a classic format. The core set will give you a mix of cards from a variety of different sets, ultimately providing you with a good balance of playable cards if you're a new player. While the set will be free, you'll have to unlock many of these cards by leveling up the game's classes. 88 cards from Classic, 54 from Basic, 55 from Wild, 4 cards returning from Ashes of the Outland. I'm not even sure I did that DLC. 4 from the Demon Hunter Initiate, 1 from Hall of Fame, Shadow Form, and 29 new cards, 20 class cards, and 9 neutral cards. Blizzard is also departing from how basic and classics have worked in the past. Instead, the new core set will arrive every year, automatically swapping out the core set cards you have in your collection. They're also retiring the Hall of Fame. So this, frankly, seems like they are trying to do something closer to Magic the Gathering. Basic and classic sets will move to the wild form as the Legacy set, the new home for most of the Hall of Fame cards. So basically, it also seems like they are getting rid of a lot of their expansions. And I imagine a lot of people are going to be frustrated, and a lot of people might be happy with this announcement. It feels definitely like this is something I had suggested they had done when I was back playing Hearthstone. It's too little too late now. I'm not going to go back and play Hearthstone, particularly in the way Activision Blizzard is, the shape that Activision Blizzard is in, but this also might be the element, certainly, that will this also might be the element that solidifies the end of Hearthstone and just makes it like Magic the Gathering. And if you want to play Magic the Gathering, I think you might be better still playing Magic the Gathering. I don't know how that concept with the rotating sets in and out is going to make a lot of people happy in the long term. Some of that, it seems like they tried to appease new players by kind of ignoring old players and irritating old players in the same step.
You're a big fella.
Where it would have probably be smarter to have just done the first part of that and just say we're giving some basic cards to everybody and not do the second part of it, which is the rotating of core sets. Or like, it really does feel like a core set is just the same as a core set, or very similar to what a core set was in Magic the Gathering.
All together now.
Quake before the inferno.
This is where I truly shine.
Okay. Moving on, since Honey Pop 2 is now out, TechRaptor has decided to do guides. They're doing guides more often than not. So it's not really news, but I would point this out. It's how to toggle Polly's junk. So Polly is... she was supposed to be a dick girl. Not really transgender, more a hermaphrodite. Because I think, as far as conversations and such, she's going to identify as female. She's going to say she's female. She's going to feel like she's female. She dresses like she's female. She just happens to have male genitalia. I don't even think they're going down the route of having both. And that cause some controversy. So then, because of course it would, and I think the creator of the game just didn't really know how to handle it particularly well. So he wanted to have that, and he wanted to not just immediately abandon that idea, because there is a niche fandom out there of people who are like that. Many Japanese porns and anime porns have dick girls in it. It's not as strange as it might sound at first blush. So he put in a toggle, and I think that mostly killed the controversy, but we'll cover it anyways. And for the most part, except for the sex scenes, you're just going to see a bulge. And so it's basically a selection at the beginning of the game where you choose your gender. So you could play this, definitely Honey Pop Tier as a lesbian if you want. You can choose your difficulty, and then it's Polly's Junk is an option of innie or outie. Here's a comparison of what Polly will look like as a character without the bulge. Here is her with the bulge. There is probably a certain argument to make that you will you might have the whole game ruined for you if you're that concerned about it, just knowing that at some level somebody out there is playing it the other way. But I mean, if you're that concerned about these kinds of things, you're probably not playing Honey Pop 2 anyways. Arguably, what they've done at that point, though, is they've made it where, since there's an option, it then becomes an argument. Why not an option for all the characters? Now, it isn't particularly realistic to say that you get to choose your significant other's genitalia in the real world, but video games are video games, and often you do get the ability to customize your own character. Very rarely have we had the opportunity to customize another character, but now we do. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a small percentage of people who would like a mod out there to make them all dick girls, and there's no way to make the main character a dick girl. It does absolutely make a argument that you now would want more customization. It also makes the problem come about that you have now kowtowed a little bit to the masses one way or another, and the creator of Honey Pop 2 has now let go of some of his artistic rights to make characters the way he wants to make him. It would have been better, I think, for him to stick by his own guns and say, no, this is the character, how I want to write them, how I want to make them. Imagine if you were able to make your own custom edit of like the crying game, and then the reveal at the end actually be a completely different reveal at the end, because the character isn't actually a man. That ruins that whole movie and the whole point of the movie, I imagine, at that point. Yeah, so we can't just edit down other people's artistic creations, and I think he should have stuck to his guns. And I wouldn't have batted an eye or had any problem dating one dick girl in a sex game when you're giving me a whole bunch of other characters. Like, I imagine there are extra characters also here, but just being highlighted here, you have no less than 11 other characters that are female in this game. If anything, there should be an argument for a secret character that is male.
Gotta speak. You just gotta listen.
But yeah, whatever the game creator wants to do, he should have stuck to his guns, I think, more than offer the option. It's an easy option to offer, but it's not an option for this kind of game that should be offered.
The quickest silver.
Because at a certain point, it means the creator didn't really care. And if the creator is putting content in their story that they don't care about, then the story is going to suffer. And from that perspective, I would also complain about somebody who wanted to make a furry game, then turning it not into a furry game. Because at a certain level, this is optional censorship. He has opted into allowing people to censor his own content. That is the weirdness, particularly of video games, more than movies or stories or books or anything like that, is that it is a one-way conversation, but video games are interactive. But yeah, it's kind of a silly topic to have this conversation on, but it is definitely the point in which this conversation is always going to start, and always a conversation like this is going to have to happen on is if games start allowing certain people to censor certain things and opt out of, I guess, the reality of the game as it was intended to be. We're going to see more and more of that. We'll start to see World War II shooters in which you have an option to toggle off all the Nazi imagery, and we'll start to see games set in Asia where you have options to toggle whether China is mentioned or not, and it'll just keep on going down that route, and eventually the option will not become an option, it will be mandatory. And so, yeah. And in this instance in particular, it's not like that one toggle option is going to get Honey Pop allowed to be sold in any like Middle Eastern country where is super conservative with suppressive like moral standards. So you're not going to have Iran allowing Honey Pop 2 because of that toggle. So they didn't get a single new cell probably by having that option.
An exemplary battle.
But clearly the developer didn't want any controversy, and if anything, I would highlight them as a developer who actually did manage to avoid getting canceled or having controversy around their game. And almost certainly all the controversy that was written about it was from people who were never going to play the game and were never going to like the game in the first place. Moving on, we have the Callisto Protocol developers have added Skybound as a strategic partner. So the Callisto Protocol, we have to kind of remind ourselves what this is. This is basically the next Dead Space or spiritual successor of Dead Space. It has some, but probably not all of the people that worked on Dead Space 1, 2, or 3. The trailer looks interesting, certainly, but I think it is very early days, and I think you have a good argument that this is going to be delayed heavily, and this is going to be a game that we see in 2022, 2023. Moving on, Gamasutra's the Nintendo boss says diverse Switch player base will help it outsell the Wii. When they say Nintendo boss, who are they talking about? Bowser of Nintendo of America, or I don't even know. Furukawa, yeah. Well, I will say there is a very diverse player base for the Switch, certainly. When you see that there's a bunch of eShop games that cover a lot of different types of players, when you see that there are more Japanese style adult games coming out on the Switch, when you see there's very family friendly Mario games coming out on the Switch, when you see a lot of games that you would have thought would have only worked on bigger consoles like the PlayStation or the Xbox, also still coming out on the Switch. You're kind of hitting three out of the 4 quadrants of potential gamers, in that you have young kids, you have gamer bros who are in their mid-20s, and you have niche gamers in horror and anime games, or just general niche gamers. And so the only quadrant, and since I'm trying to break this up into 4 quadrants, that you're not hitting greatly as far as Nintendo Switch is older people who aren't typically considered gamers. So there aren't a lot of brain training games or puzzle games that have been heavily pushed for older people. Nintendo got a lot of older people with the Wii for a brief moment there, but they're not even a very good market to target. You would almost think that if there wasn't a chip shortage right now, which is affecting everything, that we probably would have seen more Switches end up in the hands of elderly people who have nothing better to do. I'm not even sure there's things like Wheel of Fortune or Monopoly in particularly great formats on the Switch. The chip shortage also is getting talked about more, and that is going to pretty much limit the number of PlayStation 5s and Xbox Ones and just electronics in general. It might even affect some of the gadget projects, I was thinking. Although there is an argument to be made that maybe, just maybe, a chip shortage because of the pandemic affecting China might eventually work out in a favor, in that we might start to see people try to find new sources for new chip manufacturers. If, for instance, the United States or Britain or any non-Asian country in general started making chips and manufacturing chips, that would be better in the long run, because any one region or one country having monopoly on manufacturing the core components of electronics hurts the economy quite a bit. And we've been seeing that for a long time with the RAM shortages that just constantly have been going on for about a decade now, or intermittently going on. And some of that certainly also may just be pointing out the fact that we have too many gadgets being built and not enough resources to continue to build gadgets. So we probably need to recycle a lot of things, and we probably need to work harder to not build so many gadgets and have so many ridiculous gadgets built. We may hit a point where some of the elements to make semiconductors and chips are no longer necessary. We might hit a point where we are just making chips at a quantum level. I don't think we're going to hit that anytime soon, maybe 50 years from now. And at that point, certain resources may not be needed. And there is small bits of progress and efforts to eliminate a lot of the rare earth minerals that are used in developing chips anyways. And that certainly would help a lot too, because we have plenty of carbon and silicon, and gold is actually more prevalent than you would think to use for the lines on the circuit chip. It's the rare earth minerals to make the semiconductors that are mostly limited. but then also it's an intensive process. It's a very small process to make chips. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Watch the Space, which really feels like a bad name for a game. And it seems like you are just playing a multiplayer version of Asteroids where you're shooting around and having particles explode. It's $7.19 for a shared split screen player versus player. It doesn't even have online. Visually, it's kind of polished a little bit more than some really bad games, but not enough to make up for all the other problems with it. Game Researcher has an article here. Tencent has bought a minority stake in DayZ developer Bohemia Interactive. Tencent constantly trying to get their claws into companies. In all fairness, Embracer Group also is doing that. I would not be surprised one bit if it eventually comes out that Embracer Group is being funded by Sweden secretly, or Swedish business billionaires, to try and just acquire more companies so that they might have some influence in the future as to how video games are made. Now, I don't know what Swedish values would get particularly pushed in Embracer Group company games, but yeah, whenever we see these organizations and these corporations and mergers happen, it does not typically bode well for the little man and the average person. It's going to be higher priced games eventually, or less diversity of games. If anything, I think a great argument could be made that Embracer Group has embraced a lot of companies, and none of those companies have released enough games lately since they've been embraced. And they really are just rebuilding THQ, and THQ had the exact opposite problem, in which they made too many games. Now they're making too few. So they need to find that happy middle. TechRaptor has an article. Ubisoft was the #1 third-party publisher in 2020. I'm sure Ubisoft is pushing that thought from their own reviews. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Immortals, Phoenix Rising, Watch Dogs Legion. And Ubisoft apparently wants to grow live service and free-to-play games. Then here, at the bottom here we go, Embracer Group overtakes Ubisoft. So, in 2021 now, Embracer Group is more than Ubisoft. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised one bit if what's going on here is Embracer Group is trying really hard to become bigger and better than Ubisoft, so that they can take the talent from Ubisoft, which is kind of falling apart, and being a French company. It's hard to run a business in France because it's dealing with French people and French unions and France in general. It's like, moving on, we have a game on Steam called Headless Code, which this is tagged as a visual novel. It doesn't look like it's animated particularly well. It doesn't look so much like a visual novel as maybe a half adventure game, half visual novel. $19.99, English only. That's just way too expensive for the level of graphics I'm seeing here. Had you told me this was $1.99, I might consider it, but even then I'd probably ignore it for better visual novels out there. Let's see. What do we want to do?
Bluest water.
attack here.
A dance to make the world blue. Color yourself.
The final oasis awaits.
So I don't know if this really is news, but Cyan has announced a partnership with Lore. So they're basically running websites for the that they'll be using the Guild of Archivists website as the official wiki for the Myst franchise. So yeah, basically maybe we'll start to hear more about Lore, and maybe that will make more sense at this point, but at this point. So yeah, we can see here there's right now just a bunch of pages specifically around the Myst series, which arguably maybe that's all this website is going to be around, and maybe the Lore website. So basically they ported what was the Deny or Dunnypedia, which there is definitely a rabid fandom of Myst fans still out there, so you wouldn't want to see those kinds of things destroyed and eliminated.
My supremacy surpasses that of dragons!
You dare to disturb my domain, my empress.
Hear the roar of my steel!
Okay.
Sleep with the fishes.
So yeah, I don't know if that really is.
Long live the dragon empress.
I don't know if that really is news. I don't know when this is news that I saw, but Disney is also closing Blue Sky Studios, Fox's once dominant animation house behind the Ice Age franchise. So like Disney bought a lot of Fox, although the Fox TV station is now kind of an independent TV station, and I've heard rumors that they are actually going to try and do some major new things on the Fox TV station, which frankly anything new on Fox sounds interesting, but then you also run into the problem of it being Fox and them typically canceling things very quickly after like one season. So yeah, I would not get too tied into any new Fox show. If anything, they should like bring back and try and do another Star Trek parody, because they totally lost their audience, or they lost me as a viewer with that Seth MacFarlane Star Trek parody, because they put it on an online like service.
Retreat is so humiliating.
Next, we have a game on Steam here. I'm trying to hurry up, man. We have something here called Berserk Flashback, and it seems like to be a collection of 3 what they're trying to imply are Flash games, and I don't think they really are. This is $8.99, English only. Yeah, I'd just say no to that. Let's see.
How?
I could have done that one. That would have been a better card to play.
Well, settle down, would you?
Next, we have a game on Steam called One Shell Straight to Hell. Not One Shot. Interesting. It's a top-down twin-stick shooter. It kind of looks a little varied in its art, but then you're also seeing a lot of dark screenshot syndrome. Let's see, 1999 English full audio. They're comparing it to Binding of Isaac. I just don't think the visuals are there. Yeah, I don't think those visuals are here, so I'm gonna say no to that. This will be our last game. Let's see. Gematsu has Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, coming to the PS4, Xbox Series, and Switch on March 12th, PC later in 2021. I think we may have already talked about that, but that does create a weird scenario where I'm not sure all of the Crash Bandicoots can be played on PC. Tencent also has acquired a minority stake in Bohemia Interactive from Gematsu. I think we have probably talked about that. A free-to-play RPG, Goetia X, is now available for the PS4 in Japan. If that interests anybody, I'm really trying to rush here. Alright.
Peace lies on the horizon. This ends here.
A TechRaptor article here. Wingspan Pokemon mod for a tabletop simulator is now a thing. Wingspan must be a card game of some sort from the looks of it. Which, okay. Wingspan looks definitely different from what the Pokemon collectible trading card game is, but I guess if you're obsessed with Wingspan and or obsessed with Pokemon, that's an interesting mod. Here we have a game on Steam called Maniac Path 2, which this just looks like a terribly animated Joker simulator. Although, in all fairness, the Joker in any of the movies or comic books really doesn't just go on a murdering spree that often. $3.49 English Russian. No to that. Yeah. If anything, the Joker is obsessed with Batman so much that he doesn't do just murder sprees unless it directly affects Batman. Here we have a game called Nominal, which seems to be just a puzzle game focused around a bunch of buttons and trying to activate some kind of spacecraft from the 1960s. This is $14.99 English full audio. Allegedly, at least. No to that. Not a great amount of games. One of the things that has occurred to me while playing Danganronpa is because you have these free time sections, there definitely are sections where I just feel like it's too much. So if I was to play one of the Persona games where I know you have a lot more free time and you have to run around and hang out with a lot more people, that might be a hard sell or a difficult thing to stick with. It is definitely way too much in Danganronpa. There really shouldn't be any free time sections. The game just does not work well with them. But yeah, maybe I would. You'd almost have to get used to it though in Persona, and I think Persona probably does it a lot better. If anything, I think some people would argue the free time sections and the hanging out with your friends is the more important part of the game. Connected to that, TechRaptor has Persona 5 Strikers review, which Strikers I think is maybe a spin-off game. There was an interesting thought here. Most of these hot springs are in the mountains of Japan, and monkeys will sometimes get into hot springs. So I was wondering what a Japanese person would do if a monkey climbed over one of these walls and jumped in the hot springs with them. If they would just ignore it, or if they would run for their lives. I think they'd probably run for their lives. If anything, I imagine they would just assume that the monkey is not clean for as much as they bathe themselves and are prideful in keeping the public bathwater clean. So I think they would feel like that's something they wouldn't want to do. I wouldn't be surprised if there's actually like some kind of barbed wire or spikes that they install to avoid that very scenario from happening. Alright. Is there anything we can do? No.
Pitiful.
So I'm gonna lose. Czech Raptor has given it a 6.0. That's a very low number. A surprisingly polished and experimental game from the developer Omega Force. Persona 5 Strikers is overall fairly solid, but is hampered with clunky pacing and lackluster plot. Pros are excellent. Soundtrack, fantastic presentation, and well-polished game feel. Cons are clunky pacing, simplistic plot, lack of depth to certain mechanics. And this is a new writer, too, that I don't think I've recognized. So it comes down to, I guess, if whether you are believe them or not. When you look at this screen in particular, like compared to Danganronpa doesn't have an auto button. It doesn't really have a skip button. It doesn't really have a fast forward button. You can hold down the B button and sort of fast forward, but you have to hold down the button to do it. The heads-up display in Danganronpa takes up a massive amount of the top to tell you whether it's what chapter you're in and whether it's morning or night, and then it doesn't really show you anything else. And then over here there is a background music radio that is just playing all the time, and the animation in general in Danganronpa is very unique and probably not as good. But I'm talking also specifically about Danganronpa 1. Here you can see they are showing a head of the person speaking. Danganronpa doesn't do that. It would be way better if it did, because then that would highlight for me to specifically know who is speaking. Otherwise, Danganronpa just has the entire bottom half covered with a background and text plays, and you just have the name of who is speaking at the top left, and it doesn't even fade out and fade in quickly to show that somebody else is speaking. Sometimes it will swap who is shown in the middle of the screen, but that is about it. Well, we got all the mission stuff done today, which that is good. So there's really not a lot to complain about today, despite my first instincts to always complain. I kind of buried the lead here. Cyberpunk 2077 developer CD Projekt was targeted by a cyber attack, ransomware attack. Yeah, bunch of stuff is going to be leaked if they don't pay. But yeah, CD Projekt is not getting any break. Maybe they arguably don't deserve a break because of how terribly internally they've run their company. But that is unfortunate, and we probably will see more instances of things like that happening as we go forward. There's also this co-op puzzle adventure game called We Were Here that is available for free for the PS4, but sequels are going to come out in February 24th. It was previously released on Xbox and PC, which are also free for a limited time, so I went and grabbed it. But it's always nice to get a free game, but also it's questionable to get a free game that is like the first chapter in a multi-chapter game that may or may not actually ever come out. And then that brings me to the Humble Bundle page with their new way of showing bundles. It's way easy to tell which ones are the new game bundles. They have a Train Sim Expedition bundle, and yeah, if you want Train Simulator 2021 with a small selection pretty much of DLC, this might be for you. Although, in all fairness, it's important to remember that Train Simulator is like the most expensive game on Steam for the random amount of DLCs for different skins it sells. It is quite the ripoff, unless you are just obsessed with trains and or just rich, I guess. That might, well, it's still a ripoff even if you are rich. Alright, and then that brings me to my Twitter feed, and I'll start opening some things here look and see if there's any new news. Little Nightmares 2 is now on Steam. We can talk about that on Friday. And let's see. Epic Games' ability to go to war with Apple stems from its financial freedom, says the CEO. This is a Gamma Sutra article, if that interests you. We haven't really heard anything as far as that lawsuit, because I imagine nothing really has happened. The court systems, particularly the civil court systems, have been pretty much in deadlock since the pandemic started. Several of the NIS America games are half off at Good Old Games. We haven't heard about any controversy around Good Old Games lately, although we probably will with this new hack, ransomware hack. There's two separate things there. One, they locked all the information from ransomware, but two, they also claim to have gotten information from their websites, so they exfiltrated the data. But of course, any smart hacker enough to install ransomware on somebody's servers would claim they also got a copy of it and that they would leak it, because that is the threat that will get them paid more than just saying, well, your data will be deleted or locked forever if you don't pay us, because any company that's worth their salt hopefully has backups and they could just restore from the backups. So the ransomware alone is no longer good enough. You have to threaten the leak even if you can't actually leak data. At a certain level, there is definitely a question if all of the source code for, say, CD Cyberpunk or Witcher 3 came out, how much of that source code can you really use in your game without being caught? Most people, I think, would assume very little, but I think you could do quite a lot, because it's going to be very, very difficult to prove code is working. The code that you wrote is actually the code someone else wrote if you put a different skin on it and make it look make it look completely different. Like there wouldn't be anything that odd for having games play very much like Witcher or Cyberpunk 2077 and look very different. The things you couldn't use from a leak would be the art assets and the very obvious things: art assets, sound assets. You'd also have to be fairly careful not to put any glitches that would be unique and identifiable back to someone else's source code. But I can imagine a lot of mid-tier, low-tier game developers potentially looking at that code and using some of it, even a small portion of it. I could see also a lot of asset flippers out there just using the entirety of anything leaked from CD Projekt Red, and you start to see these low effort asset flip games that have the same models and skins from Cyberpunk come out. Alright, well, doesn't seem like anybody chatted, so that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.